Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business.
In recent months, there's been a lot of speculation as to whether or not we'll be heading into another recession. As a top business executive and host of C-Suite TV, this concerns me especially, as I, like all business leaders, need to be prepared to protect assets and keep companies afloat. As a means to glean this information, I sit down with some of the top experts in their fields and pick their brains to determine what's going on and how we can prepare for the months ahead. The first person I sat down with was my friend John Siliva, a renowned economist who, after retiring from his position as managing director and chief economist for Wells Fargo, started his own economist firm. Surely he has some suggestions. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is the severity of the upcoming recession, and is it going to be a recession?
I think at this point, Jeffrey, I think the severity would be simply maybe a 2 or 3. Very modest. Basically, as you know, the U.S. economy really is driven by the American consumer. And when we see the job growth that people have, the low level of jobless claims, the continued improvement overall in the financial markets, it's all very, very positive for the economy. So I put a very low probability on a recession.
Hey, John, you might even have been an old Boy Scout. What should individuals and businesses do to be prepared for this upcoming recession or mild crisis?
I think the number one story would be watch your labor costs, hire the best people possible at a reasonable price. I think what we've seen in the tech sector is the overemployment of a lot of folks who at the end of the day didn't have a lot of productivity in terms of what's going on. And then the second is really investing in capital and software, because that seems to be where we're going to get the productivity gains over the next 2 to 3 years.
Now, I keep hearing about supply chain. And of course, during COVID, we were hoarding toilet paper. Are we going to go through one of those phases again? And do we have to make sure that we have some kind of surplus of items?
I think on average, most businesses probably will increase the ratio of inventories to sales in terms of supplies. But I don't think we're going to go through another crunch on the supply side. What we're looking at, for example, you might be familiar with, Jeffrey, is the Federal Reserve Bank in New York publishes a supply chain index. That has improved dramatically. So I don't see, at least nationwide, any real constraints on the supply side.
Yeah, we're starting to see the floodgates open up a little bit, but it's still a problem here and there that I see. Now, I like to say, John, never waste a good crisis. As business leaders, what should we be taking advantage of right now?
I think expand internationally would be my number one suggestion. We have decent economic growth in the United States. We have good labor capital arrangements. Again, you can see all the strikes that are going on in Europe and England. And we can take advantage of some of the uncertainty with respect to economic policy in China. I think expanding internationally would be my number one priority.
All right, beyond expanding internationally, what's the best tip you feel every business leader needs to know right now?
I think focus on the next 2 or 3 years in terms of economic growth and profitability. As you mentioned earlier, Jeffrey, I think the probability and the severity of the recession will be small at best. And so what we're thinking of is think long term, think of the continued growth of the U.S. economy. I think we're going to have much lower inflation and fairly steady interest rates at a lower level than we have right now.
So what final thoughts would you like to leave our audience?
Be positive. I think we've had a lot of challenges in the last 2 years, as you and I have talked about, Jeffrey, but we've come through. I think we're making adjustments, and I suspect we'll have decent economic growth in the next 2 to 3 years, more modest inflation numbers, probably lower interest rates longer term. I think those are all positive for running a business.
Well, it's good to hear the news that it might not be so bad, especially from someone who really knows this system well. And that's going to give us a lot more time to go trout fishing, John. So
Yes,
thanks
sir.
so much for joining me. John's view is rather optimistic and gave me the reassurance that my business will be safe. However, his opinions seem to be rooted in the here and now. To understand how recessions have worked historically, I turned to Danielle Martino-Booth. Danielle is the founder and CEO of Quill Intelligence, prior to which she spent 9 years at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Hey, Danielle, good to have you back on the show. I tell you what, I got to ask you about the Fed. What do you think the Fed's going to do during the recession?
So I think the Fed is going to maintain a tighter stance than what we are accustomed to. And you know, if you look back over the last 40 years, that's a real game changer, because we're used to the Fed quickly changing course when the market throws a hissy fit, or if there's the slightest, sign that there's any slowing in the economy. But the inflation fight has yet to be won, and I think that that's going to keep this particular Jay Powell-led Fed engaged.
Now, I've been hearing a lot from a lot of different people in the market, outside the market. And of course, you have a lot of Fed experience. Are we paying back the stuff that we did before?
There is an element of payback here. There's an element of, we had deluded ourselves as investors and as citizens of America into believing that there was such a thing as a free lunch, and that we could take risk and not ever suffer the consequences. And now we're kind of seeing the flip side of that, which is why, markets tend to go up, and then they turn around and pull back. At the same time, you're seeing companies really press forward with cost cuts. And that's also something that we're not accustomed to. We're accustomed to free money flowing into what we're learning now is quite a few companies that overhired. They simply had too much money. They didn't know what to do with it. But backing that out of the economy is proving to be very costly.
Well, and when you have a crisis like we're seeing today, it's always a great excuse for a lot of big companies to cut workforces. Do you see more of that happening in the future?
It's interesting you raised that question. We just had the first, earlier in the year, Bank of America said we're only about 50% of the way through through the tech wreck, through the layoffs that we're going to see. And now we're starting to see firms announcing a second round of layoffs. And it's just true to script. You have a lot of inexperienced CEOs out there who are just like, look, it's money. And so, but they don't know how to efficiently run companies. The CEOs you're talking about who are using the excuse of a slowdown in order to pare back headcount, they're shrewd. They're veterans. They know exactly what they're doing. But it's much. At the same time, you've got an entirely different generation of newbies, of non-veterans, and they don't quite know what to do. They wake up and they're like, wait a minute, how did Elon Musk cut 75% of headcount and Twitter didn't crash? What am I missing here? And I think what they're missing is that they didn't know how to efficiently and effectively build business models.
Yeah, don't forget that old adage, when you get to a new C-suite job, it's got 3 envelopes in the drawer, and it says 1, blame it on the last guy. Number 2 is blame it on the market. Number 3 is get the next envelopes ready. So that's something they might want to think about. Hey, before we go, I've got to ask you this one question. With all your experience in the Fed, we've seen a lot of interest rates hike in the last year. Do you see more hikes in the coming year?
I do, but of a smaller magnitude. And I think looking at hikes, given the level that we've achieved as quickly as we have, is something of a red herring. So we might see 2 or 3 more 25 basis point hikes. But in the background, Jay Powell continues to passively, to use his word, reduce the size of the Fed's balance sheet. That's pulling liquidity out of the system and acts just as strongly as rate hikes would act. And again, that's happening at the same time that he's slowly pressing forward with smaller rate hikes. The point is higher for longer. And we're not used to that. We've been trained, it's ingrained, lower for longer. And he's trying to change the narrative, turn it on its head and say, no, you know what? We're going to be higher for longer. Get used to it.
One last question. What do you think business owners, business leaders need to be doing right now?
So I think business leaders need to be digging deep and going to the mattresses, as the Italian in me would say, and learning how to do as much as they can on their own. I'm talking about grunt work, heavy lifting. Be extremely mindful that your competitors are in a cost-cutting mode, and that therefore, if you're going to remain their competitors, you're going to have to be equally vigilant with making sure that you're running the tightest possible ship that you can and not spending an extra penny. Hard to do, but I think discipline is what's going to win this race.
Danielle's more caustic view of this current state of the economy fed into my suspicions that we're not quite in the clear. This is why I turned to Commander Mary Kelly next. Mary's a Hall of Fame speaker and earned her PhD in economics. She's a corporate advisor and has written 15 books and served as a U.S. naval commander. Hey, recession, it's the word that's on top of every business leader's mind right now, and people are feeling like we're in imminent danger, at least right now. Are they right to feel that we're in DEFCON 2 or maybe DEFCON 1? What do you think it is, Mary?
Well, the end is not in sight, but 2023 is going to be a rocky and tumultuous year. Are we in for a recession? Well, it depends on whether or not you thought we had a recession in 2022. The answer is we did. The recession happened because 2 successive negative GDP quarters do, in fact, a recession make. Whether or not you don't want to call it that or not for political reasons, that's how you interpret that. But we had a recession. We were in a recession because of government expenditures and net exports in third quarter. We pulled out of the technical recession in 2022. However, what that meant was, as most people are familiar with, higher inflation, higher costs, gas prices that were artificially deflated, again, mostly for political reasons, that are now back to normal levels. So we basically cut off one end of the blanket to sew on the other end of the blanket, and that's what we're facing in 2023.
Well, given everything we faced in COVID, is there really a new normal?
There is no such thing as a new normal. What there is new crises, challenges, and changes. And this is where real strategic leaders have to operate. They have to understand that crises are normal. They are now part of life. I taxonomize crises in 4 sectors: geopolitical, economic, domestic, and workplace. Most of our leaders are focused just on workplace crises, some in the domestic area. What we need to be paying attention to, however, are the economic crises and the geopolitical crises that are going to impact our day-to-day business decisions.
Well, in fact, should we be thinking more global than local?
Absolutely. Global impacts. So look at what's going on right now. 23,000 people are dead because of the seismic activity between Syria and Turkey, which that fault has existed for thousands of years. It shouldn't be a surprise, but we haven't had activity for 200 years. That's an external shock. You can't count for that, but that's going to take resources. Russia is still in Ukraine. The death tolls have never been higher on both sides. That's taking a toll on food insecurity in places as far away as Africa and Asia. China saying that they're going to take Taiwan back by 2027 means that more people are more cautious about doing business on the Pacific side, and they are in fact looking at the Atlantic side, even with the Russia-Ukrainian problems with shipping. So we do have to be paying attention to what's going on the global scale, and we have to understand that there are external market shocks that we can't control. What we have to control are the business decisions we make every single day and looking into the future.
Yeah, you're starting to scare me a little bit, Mary, there. I just thought I just wanted to meet my sales number for the month or the quarter. Well, what can business leaders do to migrate from the negative effects that we see in these external economic shocks?
Jeffrey, first, they need to start very micro. You need to look very, very carefully at the things you can control and not the things you cannot. So certain things you have to be aware of them, but you cannot control them and you cannot influence them. Focus very narrowly with laser-like focus on the things you can control, which is how many sales calls are your people making every day? Are you making the right sales calls? I met with a team the other day and they said, yeah, we've got a goal for our people to everybody make 50 outbound calls a day. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, because their salespeople tell me, I'm just praying that I get an answering machine. That's just wasting time. We cannot afford to waste time. So look very carefully at where your time wasters are and make sure your people's time is best spent on doing things that increase your ROI for their time. Otherwise, you're going to be doing what everybody else is doing, which is laying off a whole bunch of people because you can't make your numbers.
So, Mary, I know you wrote another bestseller, your latest book, Better in 52 Weeks, Action Steps to a Better Business and a Better Life with Less Stress and More Productivity. That seems to be more relevant right now than ever. Tell us why you did this book.
Jeffrey, because my managers and my leaders need short-term, quick fixes that actually work with the challenges they're facing right now today. My strategic thinkers need to be thinking big, and I'm talking not just next quarter and next year, but 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road. My managers have to be worried about whether or not their employees are engaged today at work, whether or not their employees are focused, whether or not their people are being productive. The book is designed in 5 stages. How to start a business. Okay, maybe you're starting a division or a new department, or you're branching out into a new territory, and then growing that area. And again, these are one-page, very focused solutions on a specific problem. And then there's a section on productivity, there's a section on how to build your team, and there's a section on growing your leadership as a whole. I've got about 80 of these 5-minute solutions. A publisher put these together in a book that's designed, if you just do one a week for 52 weeks, business grows.
Well, Commander Kelly, you are spot on as always. And since you said think big, I love that because gave you a plug for your book. I'll give a plug for my book, Think Big, Act Bigger, The Rewards of Being Relentless. It was good to hear an opinion that gives us an international perspective. We sometimes forget this is a global issue, and America's right at the top of it. But I also wanted to hear thoughts which were closer to home. Hence why I turned to Mark Skousen, a leading economist who has served as a consultant to a variety of Fortune 500 companies, including IBM and Hutchinson Technology. Hey, Mark, great to see you again. When we last spoke, you felt that we're headed into a mild recession. Is that still what you're seeing?
Well, actually, GDP statistics last year suggested a small recession, but my gross output statistic, which measures spending at all stages of production, includes the supply chain, which is very important, showed no recession at all. However, it did show that the economic growth rate was declining and was headed toward a recession. So 2023 is still has a good chance of a recession. I don't know how serious it would be because the supply chain shortages have really been the thing that the economy has been making a comeback. And because that's what business does. They respond to shortages by filling in the gaps. And there's a lot to be said for the resilience of this economy. And of course, Biden is taking full credit for all of this. And yet he's still under the Trump tax cuts. So you might talk to Art Laffer about that because, frankly, we're benefiting. The Biden administration is benefiting from these tax cuts that went through several years ago.
It sounds almost like we should flip a coin, but we need that coin to go back into the economy. Every cent counts at this point. So what economic trends or indicators should business leaders be paying attention to in this current climate?
Well, I do think interest rates are a very big driving force. The Federal Reserve is really pushing on the pedal to raise rates and catch up with the inflation that's going on. Money supply growth has gone down to zero. So that's an indication of trouble ahead. The what we call the inverted yield curve, where the short-term rate, which is over 4%, is higher than the long-term rates, which is under 4%. It's not a big difference. It's not like it's a huge negative yield curve. So that may suggest a mild recession. But I think at some point the Fed is going to pivot and realize, hey, we've won the battle against inflation. It's coming down. I don't know if it'll get down to 2% because the Biden administration is spending money like water. The deficits are getting worse. The national debt is rising. So there are some long-term problems that we are facing. But short-term, I'm really actually surprised on how buoyant our economy has been in this era of inflation and rising interest rates.
Well, I love to see an economist who's excited anytime about the economy or what's going on. Hey, now, Mark, I know you personally. We've been friends for a number of years. And I know that you're a direct descendant of Benjamin Franklin. And I know that you're aware that history repeats itself when it comes to economics. At least it plays a big part. I want to ask you a question about Adam Smith's hand. Is it still visible today? Because he, of course, was the founder of the free market capitalism system and would be this year 300 years old. Is it still relevant today?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned Ben Franklin, and both of them had a laissez-faire view. In fact, Ben Franklin said that an industrious and virtuous people may be cheaply governed. And I don't think we have cheap government today. I think Democrats, Republicans, everyone would agree that government's pretty expensive. The Adam Smith model is there's some wins and some loses. Free trade is still very vibrant. Globalization is still going on. That was one of the big parts of Adam Smith's invisible hand. Limited government, that's a little bit more difficult. He certainly favored a balanced budget. He favored sound money, the gold standard. We've moved away from those things, and we're struggling in those areas. But my biggest concern is the size of government. It's not cheap anymore. It's ballooned, and it continues to grow, whether a Republican or Democrat. So this is a very serious danger problem, especially the national debt, where with these interest rates raising, we're headed for some kind of a monetary crisis with the interest rates going through the roof. This could be a very expensive experiment by the Fed to keep raising these rates. There is a downside to it, and that is the federal government fiscal policy gone awry.
Well, it's still a lot less than the rates that we paid back in the 80s, or at least the early 80s, that a lot of us saw as double-digit numbers that were way out of control. Listen, Mark, I always like to say never waste good crisis. As business leaders, what should we be taking advantage of right now?
I think the technology advances that we're seeing in AI, in maybe even the digital currencies, there's a lot of things, the blockchain that's going on there. These new technologies that are coming online with automatic driving and lots of ways that we can use this new technology, I think we need to be in the forefront of doing that, because Adam Smith even said that. He had that optimism that no matter the greatest errors of administration, we can see the natural improvement where we all engage in these new technologies, the new innovations. That's really the key. All of the economists say that economic growth is linked to the new technologies, and the United States has always led the world in that area.
So, Mark, I give you one last question. If you owned a business or were, helping someone with the business, what are some best practices for managing financial risk in uncertain economic times that you would recommend?
Well, cost cutting is extremely important. You always have to watch that bottom line. And I particularly like the fact that all the major corporations, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft or Apple or Google, they all have a huge cash position. Even Warren Buffett has a huge cash position. And why do you need that? Because you don't know what's going to happen. And if there's a sudden recession, how are you going to survive? Those who have a lot of cash on hand, they're in a good shape to continue to keep their best employees and also to look for bargains out there. So that's what I would say, to be very careful, be prudent, don't overextend yourself right now, build a strong cash position, and be prepared to take advantage of these new technologies that are out there.
Mark gave good insight into the direct role that the U.S. government plays in the state of the economy. Since Mark name-dropped Dr. Art Laffer in the interview, who's a friend of mine, I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to ask him for his advice. Dr. Laffer was a member of Ronald Reagan's Economic Policy Board for both of his presidential terms and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2019 for his contributions to the field of economics.
Dr. Laffer, what are the current indicators that suggest a potential recession, and how severe do you think it's going to be?
Well, I think the runs in the banks are the most important indicator there. And I mean, if you look at big indicators, you'd have to look at the balance sheet of the Fed, which is now once again approaching $9 trillion, which is way out of control. And you have to look at fiscal policy, this budget that Biden just proposed, $6.9 trillion with huge tax increase and all. Those are the two background things that are guaranteeing that the system ultimately will explode if these things are carried out.
How does the current economic situation compare to past recessions, and what can we learn from history to help us navigate our current state?
just if you look at past ones, you get the 2008, 2009 situation. You get the 1987 one. If you won't remember that, you're too young. But if you go back much earlier, you get a bunch of these, and they all sort of happen when you get bad monetary and fiscal policy mixed together. It's like turning on a boiler. If you go into a room and have a boiler there, you turn the heat all the way up, you turn off the safety valves. All right. And every 15 minutes, you walk in with a little brass tap hammer and you go on the boiler. By turning the heat on full blast and by shutting off the safety valves, you've guaranteed the boiler will explode. By walking in every 15 minutes with a little brass tap hammer going, you guaranteed to be there when it happens. And, that's Signature Bank, that's Silicon Valley Bank, that's Credit Suisse. All of these are indicators of, these are catalysts that have happened in the boiler, but the boiler has not been rectified at all. We have an underlying fiscal and monetary situation that is, it's still going the wrong direction and will continue to yield really catastrophic results if we don't stop it.
Let me ask you this. How might businesses be impacted by the recession, and what steps can they take to prepare?
Right now, my advice, at least the advice I follow, is never try to catch a falling knife. When politicians make decisions, when they are either panicked or drunk, the consequences are rarely attractive. And these people are panicked. They don't know what they're doing. They're sitting in a room in the Oval Office, 7 or 8 of them or 9 of them. And what's your idea? What do you think? Can you have any ideas? This is not the way to think about economics. It's to sit back, be cool, be calm, collected, get your ducks in order ahead of time, be prepared for crises. This group is not prepared in any way, shape, or form for them. And, whenever you see everyone panicked around you, put your hands over your ears, shut your eyes, and say, I'm not listening, I'm not listening, I'm not listening, because a week from now, they won't be panicked. And what you want to do then is when the dust settles and the smoke clears, that's when you make your business decisions. Otherwise, do not do something during a panic time, because you'll live to regret most of the situation. Now, when you ask what type of situation should you be in right now, cash is a great position to be in right now. And I'm not saying the markets won't go up. They may well, but frankly, this is not the risk you want to take, I don't think.
We spoke with a fellow economist, Mark Skousen, who mentioned how we're still benefiting from tax reform under Trump. Can you talk a little bit about this and how it compares to what Biden's doing?
Well, sure. Trump tax cuts, which began in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is what it was. We lowered that corporate tax from 35 to 21, I think it was the number. We rode the personal income down to 37.9, I think it was, and instead of 39. We did all sorts of other great things there, and it paid for itself within 2 years. We've got the data on it. If you've seen my book, Taxes Have Consequences, Complete History of the U.S. Income Tax, which just came out, you can see the last chapter is on the Trump tax cuts, and they paid for themselves. They did everything right, and all these other people were just totally wrong on the situation. And Biden's is just the opposite. Everyone thinks it's wonderful. They'll get a lot of more revenue. They're estimating some 5.7 trillion more revenues in their tax cuts. That's just acres and acres of soap suds and horse manure. They will not get the money they expect. People will shelter their income. They'll earn less. All of that will happen, and the revenues will go down. And these people would be sorely, sorely shaken by the results that they actually get.
Let me ask you one last question. What are some of the potential opportunities for businesses to capitalize on during a recession?
Well, you got to look at how the specifics are in the recession or the downturn. And I would not put this as a recession, to be honest with you, if I may. This is a long-term secular decline in the U.S. economy, maybe with wiggles and bibbles as you go along it. But we have had one of the slowest growth 25-year periods in U.S. history, and there's nothing out there that tells me this is not continuing. Now, when you look at the U.S. secular decline, which is really the problem, if you look at the secular decline, we're not alone. Russia is having a lot of problems. China's now swung the other way as well. Europe is in a long downturn. Even Chile is going down. Britain. And so we are the tallest midget in the group. We are suffering the least, but we are clearly the ones who have to lead it out. And if we don't do it, who will? No one else can do that. And all of that depends upon the elections in 2024, or maybe later than that. If we've gone 25 years so far, there's no reason why we can't go longer. but I hope we don't, because I'm 82 years old and I want to enjoy the next boom.
Should tax cuts be a part of that?
Of course they should be. We should move to a low-rate, broad-based flat tax. Duh. I mean, anyone with any sense in economics knows that's what you want to do. We want to get rid of all of these little taxes there and replace it just the way I did with Jerry Brown when he ran for president in 1992. You know, we replaced all federal taxes with 2 low-rate, broad-based flat taxes. We had sin taxes were still there, but that's the way you want to go. And you want spending restraint, you want sound money, you want minimal regulations, you want free trade, and then get the hell out of the way and let the market solve it for themselves. And that's the way you go. And it's been the truth for the past 3 centuries and probably will remain so for the next 3 centuries as well. Rich people.
It's interesting to get a Jerry Brown quote from you and not a Ronald Reagan.
Well, there's a Ronald Reagan one too. We did very close. We took the last 86 Tax Act. We dropped 11 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets. We dropped the corporate from, from 45% to 34%. And with 46 to 34%, we take the personal income tax down from 70% down to 28%. We went from 11 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets. I mean, what's not lovable about that? And did you notice the economy? I don't know if you noticed, the economy did okay. When we came into office on January 20th, 1981, the prime interest rate in this wonderful country of yours was 21.5%. And between Volcker and Reagan, with tight money and expansive fiscal policy, we brought that inflation rate way down. We created 20 plus million jobs. I mean, it was just wonderful. Why not do what worked before? Duh. I mean, you know, it just seems so silly and simple. But you know, there's no fixing stupid. And you know, there they go, and you know, they're just doing it again like they always do. And you know, that means that we look very good in 24, by the way. Just very seriously, the election of 24 looks very good.
Since Art gave yet another historic perspective on the economy, I thought it was time to look forward, which is why I turned to my friend Daniel Burrus, who approaches the economy from a futurist perspective. Daniel is a leading strategic advisor to Fortune 500 executives who the New York Times has touted as one of the top 3 business gurus. In his 35-year career, Daniel has developed a reputation for his exceptional record of accurately predicting the future of technological change and its direct impact on the business world. All right, Dan, it's good to have you back on my show. Now, of course, you're one of the leading futurists. You look ahead. You tell us what's way out there. How severe do you think this recession is going to be, and what effects will it have on business, or is this just like a Chicken Little situation?
Well, a couple of things to understand there. This recession, as we know of it, is going to not be evenly distributed, meaning it depends on where you are. Just a reminder, back in 2008, now I'm in San Diego right now, near where I live, the malls during the entire recession, they were packed. Everybody was buying. It looked like there was no recession. If I would have gone down just a little south of San Diego to an area called Chula Vista, it was devastated by it. So depends on your market, depends on your customers, depends on what sector you're in. So let's get that straight. So understand it's not evenly distributed, whatever it might be. Secondly, there are 2 basic types of change, right? There's cyclical change. That what goes down will come up. A recession is cyclical. We'll have it. And by the way, we won't be in it forever. It will go up, which means you need to be doing the things that position you to thrive as it goes back up while it's going down. Really important. And the other kind of change is these permanent exponential changes caused by technology. Again, once people get refrigeration for their homes in India, they're not going back. Once the people park their car or their bicycles and get cars in China, they're not going back. Well, now that we have AI, we've shifted in a way from big data to big AI, right? And with generative AI and Chat GPT, by the way, if you haven't tried it yet, you'd better be trying it. We can get 80% there on our marketing. We can get 80% there on so many things quickly. It's to save you time, to save you money. But then, of course, you need to put in your effort with your team to get you to the top 100. So in other words, there's powerful tools that allow us to do things that were impossible last year. Some of them are free. So let's not waste this recession.
All right, so you talked about technologies. What technologies should businesses be searching for and deploying?
All right, well, thanks. First of all, I've been kind of compiling a list of AI tools that can do everything from you talk into it and it creates a PowerPoint slide based on what you ask for. By the way, that's free. One that will take, a video that you have and give you exactly a transcript of what it said and translate it into any language. By the way, that's free. I got over 100 of those. In other words, there are, it's a wow.
It is.
It's a whole
it is.
wow.
Dan, it is a wow. That's a big wow.
All of us that are looking at this recession, I want you to understand this. We have entered the holy cow phase. Don't blow that, because technology has accelerated 8 to 10 years during 2020, 21, 22, like AI and all these things that we have. And by the way, some of you are noticing a big cut in employees in the big tech firms. And a lot of people are saying, recession in tech. No, there isn't. All they're doing is getting rid of all the excess people they hired in the last 2 years because it accelerated by 10 years. And AI is letting them do things that couldn't do before. So even if you're a small retailer, even if you're a mom and pop shop, you can use these tools. Now, of course, I've got a great tool for everybody, and it's free. If you go to my website, Burrus, BURRUS.com, you can download my 25 top tech trends and look at which ones you want to take advantage of. It's right on the front. Doesn't cost you anything. I suggest you do that.
All right. And we love a good pitch. Nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I want everybody
well, hey, we better be pitching.
Exactly. We always better be pitching, especially in a recession. And as Dan mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity for people and finding great people as they get out of these tech sectors and look for other jobs. All right, Dan, thanks so much for joining us right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV. Well, now we have a clearer understanding of how we should run our businesses moving forward and how to work with instead of against the economy. Hopefully, you all gain knowledge that you can apply to your business as well. Now, the economy might be an abstract concept that is easy to be afraid of, but like all things unknown, the only way to conquer it is to approach it without fear and accept that unexpected quirks come with it. In all bad things, there's always good things. And even in a recession, there's opportunities. So I now look at the potential recession with a sense of optimism. Hey everyone, Jeffrey Hayzlett here, host of All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in. This has been a big endeavor that took a lot of work and a lot of hands. And I want to thank my team at C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio for really pushing it and making it possible. But most of all, I want to thank my guests, Daniel Burrus, Daniel D. Martino-Booth, Commander Mary Kelly, Dr. Art Laffer, and Mark Skousen. Thank you all for giving me of your time and sharing your invaluable insights into the economy. It was truly a pleasure, and now it's time to do business.
Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winter-Brill. We're here with Joshua Spodek. He's the author of Leadership Step by Step, Become the Person Others Follow. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
You know, Josh, right off the bat, as soon as I started reading your book, I thought to myself, there's so many that think you're either born a leader or you're not. What's your take on that when people say that to you?
First of all, I hear that a lot. And the first thing I say is that it's a myth. And having taught hundreds and hundreds of students through my course, I see the changes that happen. In fact, I can almost see it week to week, the changes that happen, where people are able to do things that they never thought they could before.
Okay. Do you think, though, that some of those things that we're going to get into, though, do you think some people are just born that way, it is innate, or do you think every great leader has learned leadership?
I think every great leader has learned leadership. They might not have studied it in particular. A lot of people, life hands them challenges. A lot of people, they get a big challenge early in their life and they can't handle it and they think, oh, I just can't do it. Others get a little challenge early, a medium challenge later, a big challenge later, and they develop the skills over time. And we think they're natural, but they just learn things like anybody else. No one's born leading.
when I get to read a lot of these books, there's so many things that are sort of aha moments. I was like, wow, I've never heard that before. That's so interesting. And what I loved immediately, which you set up right in the beginning, you say you treat leadership as a performance-based field. And you make an analogy. You say, oh, if we learn piano or if we learn sports, we learn dance. You take classes. There's a method to the madness. You learn piano scales. You learn dance moves. You take lessons to be a better tennis player. You found that in academia, you learn about leadership, but no one tells you how to do it. So you're teaching this as you would learning to play piano or learning to play a sport, which I thought was such a unique way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I went to an Ivy League business school, top school. When I took the classes, I felt like the classes there opened the door to this whole side of the emotional and social side of life and business. But it opened the door because the way that they taught classes was through case study, lecture, reading psychology papers, writing analytical papers. Useful, very useful, but it didn't give you the social and emotional skills that leaders have to have.
But I love that you say to write this book, you took classes in acting, you took classes in music, right? To use that as sort of a launching point to now apply it to leadership, to execute.
Yeah, in my case, acting was where I drew from originally. And so I took Meisner technique, and Meisner took a style of learning, and he codified it. He made a very systematic approach. So I was both taking it to learn acting and the performance aspect of it, and also in the back of my mind, I was always a professor thinking of what's this technique and how can I use it? So I took what works in another area very successfully, and then I started realizing music, sports, military, all these other places also use this technique.
So what is the technique?
In the book, I call it ACEP learning, ACEP, active, social, emotional, expressive, performance-based. Leadership is not an academic field. It's not something, you can learn the theory of leadership and just leave it at that, but most people want to lead. They want to be promoted. They want to get hired. They want to get funded. And so it's to learn the social and emotional skills. The style of learning is to give you exercises, and the first ones are simple, not always easy, but they're not ones where you're performing in front of a lot of people, and then you work up to the next set and the next set. So the 4 units in the class are understand yourself, lead yourself, understand others, and lead others. And leading others is the pinnacle. That's the really challenging stuff where you're face to face with people. And a lot of those exercises would be very difficult. And a lot of people never reach that in life. But when that's just a little bit more challenging than the stuff before, which was a little bit more challenging than the stuff before, which we began with exercises that are actually not that hard. So people go from beginner. A lot of people have never done leadership of any sort before. Like I teach undergrads, and they come in and they think they're coming in to take a write a paper course, and they find out they get really nervous. Like, what, you want me to do stuff with people?
So it's performance based.
Yeah, and by the end of it, they do perform in front of their classmates, but the exercises have you work with people and projects in your life outside of the classroom, and that's where you face these challenges, but in a safe, comfortable way that's been tested with many people before, and by the end of it, invariably, they love it and they're looking for more.
I love it because you went to graduate school to learn leadership. You learned it and you realized something's just not clicking here. Like there was a void. There was a reason that you went out and wrote this, all those things you wish you would have known back when you were learning. And just we were talking off camera, it's as if what you've taught here is what should be taught in those graduate schools, right? Yeah. The reason you wrote this is because you didn't learn this the way you should have back in school, so to speak.
Yeah, very successful leaders, if you look at how they became successful leaders, it's by doing things. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail, but you learn from the failures and you become a leader through practice. Right. That's not what happened in the school. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that in the future, go ahead 10 years, this is how leadership classes will be taught. I'm not saying other fields, but definitely leadership.
Is that surprising to you that, because I took leadership classes undergraduate as well at the same school you did, and it is so interesting to think that why weren't we executing in real life examples? Why is everything so theoretical? Why has no one else thought to make it performance-based, like practicing a sport, learning to sing, learning to dance? It seems like such a simple, obvious idea, but no one's doing it.
That simple, obvious, effective nature of it is what compelled me to do it, why I'm so passionate about it. And I often wondered, why was it that way? And I think it was that business schools existed before leadership classes existed.
Right.
And so you have all these professors who, how did they get there? Publish or perish. They publish. They're very good at publishing things. And a lot of universities, they're very good at teaching people to become teachers, because that's what they're good at. If you look at what traditional education teaches, it's intellectually very challenging. and you learn a lot of intellectual stuff. Not bad for leaders to have, but socially and emotionally, and if you look at the behavior, it's much more they're teaching compliance, which is almost the opposite of leadership.
I was just going to say they're teaching us compliance, not leadership, which is what you talk about in the book. Off camera as well, you were telling me about some real life examples. I was like, can you tell me about some people, famous or not, that have taken your leadership step-by-step approach, executed, and it's worked?
Yeah, I got an email a little while ago. It was followed up by a phone call. One of my clients, he came to me. He was applying to business school, and he came to me because he'd applied 4 years in a row, didn't get in. Then we started working together, and he started doing these exercises. And first of all, gets into Cornell and Oxford. Decides not to go to business school. And so he's working in technology. He meets a guy who runs a fashion company, the founder of a fashion company. And he tells the guy, look, I can do the tech stuff that you want me to do.
Right.
I really like fashion. Up front, I'm not experienced in it. And then what he says to me is, then I led him to hire me. And he's not the first student of mine who said, I led someone to hire me. Because, and he asked the guy, why'd you take me? I didn't have any experience. And he said, because you get it. I can teach you fashion, but I can't teach getting it. What he didn't know was that I teach getting it. And that's what this gives, is getting it.
I love what you just said, because probably up to this point, most people are thinking, oh, this is going to teach me how to be a leader. But what you just said is different. It led me to get a job. That's a different kind of leadership, like we mentioned earlier. So it's not just about leading a team, but it's leading yourself into certain situations and the like. It's kind of what you just said, right? One
of the things that drove a lot of the development of this is that a lot of people have issues with their CEOs, their boss, their managers. And a lot of people think, I can only lead if I have authority over somebody. Actually, leading with authority, often people want to undermine that authority. They want to push back. If you lead someone through understanding what motivates them, through behaving in ways that make them feel comfortable sharing what motivates them, you can motivate anybody that way. You can lead anybody that way. It can be someone above you in a hierarchy. It can be your spouse. It can be your kids.
Right.
It can be someone that you're selling to, and it can be yourself.
But Josh, what I love in terms of this conversation about leadership, really, when you say step by step, you mean it, because there's very specific exercises in a very fluid manner that you follow that really will make the difference in terms of accomplishing what you talk about in the book.
Yeah, if you look at the Amazon reviews, there's a lot of people are giving it really high ratings from reading it, and reading it is valuable. Doing the exercises takes it to a whole other level. So if you really work through the exercises, you can spend months working on these, and you can spend a lifetime coming back to them, but it really takes it to another level, because that experience, facing your social and emotional challenges, that's where you develop these skills.
Well, Josh, thanks so much. I mean, there you said it. You can't just read the book. You have to do the exercises, because that makes all the difference. And within the exercises, you have these great things which we didn't even get to, called the 3 raisins exercise, feed forward, reflection questions. So it's really good stuff. Bravo. And again, we look forward to reading your next book.
Thank you.
And if you'd like more information on this book, just go to our website. It's c-suitebookclub.com, c-suitebookclub.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.